At 40 below wind chill, exposed skin could freeze before a man finished a prayer. And on the worst night Black Harbor, Alaska had seen in decades, Rowan Vale heard something louder than the storm hitting his house on the bluff. Fists. Wild, desperate human fists slamming against the outer door of the strange, insulated entryway the whole town had laughed at for months. The people outside were not strangers. They were the same neighbors who had called his home a panic bunker, a submarine, a monument to grief. Now, they were on his porch, freezing to death, begging him to open the second door. Black Harbor was the kind of place that looked beautiful from a distance and brutal up close. A fishing town cut into a narrow Alaskan inlet, with hard water, steep rock, and a population small enough for gossip to travel faster than weather. By September of 2024, the only thing anybody in town enjoyed more than discussing crab numbers was mocking the house Rowan Vale was building above the harbor mouth. Rowan was 67, a former maritime safety engineer from Seattle, a widower who had gone quiet after his wife, Nora, died without warning. He had not come to Alaska looking for friends. He had come looking for silence, hard weather, and a piece of land nobody else wanted. A wind-lashed basalt bluff above town where winter hit first and mercy hit last. He did not design a cozy retreat. He designed a survival machine. The walls were insulated concrete and dense timber. The windows were narrow, triple-glazed units set deep into the structure. The roof was strapped, overbuilt, and angled to throw off ice instead of collecting it. And at the front, jutting out like something torn off a ship, was the feature that turned Rowan into Black Harbor's favorite joke. An 8-foot storm porch with 2 separate doors. The outer door was marine-grade, insulated, steel-hinged, and sealed tight against weather. Behind it sat a narrow holding chamber with rubber matting, drain channels, and hooks for soaked coats. Then came the inner door, a heavy steel fire door that sealed off the heated part of the house. Rowan called it a thermal lock. Black Harbor called it insane. The joke really took off when Nolan Pike, the contractor who poured Rowan's slab, described the plans during a card game at the harbor bar. "He's building a house like the weather's trying to collect a debt," Nolan had said. 18-inch walls, steel fasteners everywhere, and a front entry that works like a damn decompression chamber. By morning, everyone had heard. Maddie Sloan, who ran the bakery counter inside the general store, laughed so hard she had to set down the cinnamon rolls. "A decompression chamber? In Black Harbor? What's next? Torpedoes in the pantry?" But the worst of it came in public. Every December, the town held a Winter Lights fundraiser in the school gym. Cheap white bulbs, overcooked salmon chowder, and Mayor Elias Mercer working the microphone like he was already running for higher office. That year, Elias had even more reason to perform. He had just finished his own custom house near the marina. Cedar, glass, open concept everything, and a 2-story window wall facing the water. Beautiful, expensive, built to impress people who never had to survive a blackout inside it. Midway through the fundraiser, Elias spotted Rowan near the coffee urn and grinned. "Rowan," he called into the mic, "I drove past your place this morning. I just want to ask one thing. Are we preparing for winter or docking a submarine?" The room broke open. Elias spread his arms. "Because unless the North Pacific plans to attack us personally, I'm not sure why any man needs 2 front doors to enter one house." Rowan did not smile. He set his paper cup down and answered in a voice so steady the room had to quiet itself to hear him. "When the power quits," he said, "beautiful houses become cold very fast." Elias gave him that soft, patronizing smile people reserve for a man they have already decided is damaged. "We've got backup crews, snow machines, and the most reliable power on this part of the coast." Rowan held his gaze. "Weather doesn't care what your brochure says." The room laughed again, softer this time, because nobody enjoys being reminded that nature keeps the final vote. For the next 3 weeks, Black Harbor was almost warm by local standards. Harbor ice never fully formed. Kids rode bikes in knit hats. The long-range forecast promised freezing rain, some wind, and the usual seasonal mess. People decorated for Christmas. Elias posted photos of his glowing window wall over the marina. Nolan bragged that his crew was still roofing in December. The town felt smarter than winter. Rowan did not. Inside his finished house, he kept glancing at the old brass barometer mounted near the kitchen shelves. The pressure was dropping too fast, and in the wrong rhythm. Wind over the inlet had shifted twice in one afternoon. Seabirds that normally haunted the docks had vanished inland. He listened to the marine forecast, then the inland weather band, then stopped trusting both. Wet coastal air was pushing in from the Gulf. At the same time, brutal interior cold was building behind the mountain pass north of town. If the gradient snapped hard enough, Arctic outflow would blast through the pass, slam into the moist harbor air, and turn the whole inlet into an ice trap. The official forecast called it nuisance weather. Rowan loaded lamp oil, dried beans, water jugs, stove wood, and medical supplies into the back of his truck. His last stop was McCready's Supply at the edge of town. Gabe McCready was ringing up rope for a fisherman when Rowan set 2 boxes of long burn candles and a stack of stove bricks on the counter. "Board your windows tonight," Rowan said. "Fill every container you own with water. Tell your daughter to move her car off the street and stack wood indoors." Gabe blinked. "Forecast says sleet and gusts." "Not in this inlet," Rowan said. "If the pass opens, this town is going to flash freeze." Gabe gave him a tired little shrug that filed the warning under end-of-the-world hobbyism. "That all for you?" Rowan paid, loaded the truck, and drove away. It was the last warning he would give anybody. The sky changed at 5:07 p.m. The color went wrong first. Not black, not gray. A hard, bruised green that made the harbor water look metallic and dead. Rain started, but it was supercooled and mean. It hit railings, pilings, mirrors, power lines, and froze on contact. Boats at the marina glazed over like they were being dipped in glass. Then the pass opened. Arctic air came screaming out of the interior like a freight train through a gun barrel. The inlet turned into a wind tunnel. Gusts slammed down Main Street hard enough to shove parked trucks sideways on their suspensions. Ice-loaded spruce branches snapped. Power lines whipped and clashed. Then the first transformer blew over the bait shed in a bloom of blue light. 30 seconds later, Black Harbor went dark. Inside Mayor Mercer's waterfront showpiece, the silence after the outage lasted all of 3 heartbeats before the house began revealing what it really was. A shell. The radiant floors died. The forced air backup never kicked because the control board lost power. The giant window wall facing the marina turned from a luxury feature into a refrigerated slab. Frost crawled across the inside edges of the glass so fast it looked alive. "Elias," his wife Lena said, pulling a blanket around their son. "Why isn't the generator on?" Elias was already at the utility closet with a flashlight between his teeth. "Automatic transfer must have failed," he muttered. What had really failed was the battery heater on the backup unit outside. The engine was locked up in ice. By 8 o'clock, the temperature inside the house had dropped through 50. Their daughter Tessa wore 2 sweaters and still shook. 12-year-old Callum sat rigid on the couch with his jaw clenched so hard it hurt. The gas fireplace looked promising, until Elias lit it and the storm pressure shoved smoke straight back into the room. Lena doubled over. Cold air hissed under the sliding door seams in a constant predatory whisper. Across town, Nolan Pike learned that diesel gels when cold arrives faster than a man can think. His portable generator coughed twice and died. Maddie Sloane's apartment above the bakery had no secondary heat at all. Pipes began freezing inside walls all over town. Cell service flickered, then vanished when ice loaded the relay tower on the ridge. By midnight, the outside air was deep below zero, and the wind made it murderous. On the bluff, where the storm hit hardest, Rowan's house stayed at 71 degrees. The masonry stove at the center of the living room gave off slow, solid heat that had nothing to do with the grid. The concrete floor held warmth like memory. The battery bank kept a few lights, radios, and sensors alive. When Rowan stepped out to his woodshed, he used the storm porch exactly as designed. Inner door shut, outer door open, wood carried in, outer door sealed. Only then did he open the inner door again. The house did not lose its heat. Not even a little. He stood at the recessed window and looked down over the harbor. Black water, black streets. No porch lights, no movement. A town erased into weather. He said it to no one. They trusted comfort too much. Down at the marina, comfort was almost gone. At 1:12 a.m., Elias scraped frost from the inside of the glass with a serving spoon and looked uphill through bursts of blowing snow. For 1 second, the whiteout thinned, and he saw it. A dim amber square on the bluff. Then, a line of smoke, straight and certain, climbing from a chimney. Rowan's house. He turned back to the living room. Callum's lips had lost color. Tessa had stopped complaining, which frightened Lena more than the wind. In bad cold, silence was never good. "We're leaving," Elias said. Lena stared at him. "Into that?" "If we stay here, the kids are going hypothermic before morning." 10 minutes later, Nolan Pike hit the service door with his fist, June folded under his arm. He had seen the same chimney. The 6 of them layered up in the dark like people dressing for a war they had mocked that afternoon. Ski shells, wool hats, work gloves, scarves, rain pants over pajamas, extra socks shoved into boots too fast to lace properly. Elias opened the side door. The storm hit them with such force it felt alive, cold like teeth. They formed a chain and started up the access road toward the bluff. A walk that took 12 minutes in daylight became a blind crawl through drifts and ice-polished ruts. Snow blew sideways so hard it erased depth. The road disappeared. The only reason Elias knew they were still climbing was that his thighs were burning and his lungs felt flayed raw. Halfway up, Callum stumbled and went limp on the safety rope. "I can't feel my hands," the boy slurred. "Dad, I'm tired." Elias grabbed him so hard he nearly ripped the coat seam. "You do not stop. Look at me. You keep moving." June Pike dropped next, one knee disappearing into the drift. Nolan hauled her up with both arms and nearly lost his own footing. Tessa pressed one glove over her face because the skin under her eye had started to burn from wind exposure. Lena was crying, and nobody could tell because the tears froze before they left her cheeks. Then the shape of Rowan's house rose through the storm. Not a cabin, not a chalet. A dark, anchored block of structure crouched against the rock like it intended to outlive the century. They slammed into the porch steps, clawed their way up, and threw themselves at the outer door of the storm porch. Elias pounded first. Nolan pounded harder. The sound vanished into the wind. Inside, Rowan sat near the radio, fully dressed, boots on, a thermos of tea by his elbow. He had not been sleeping. Men who respected weather rarely did on nights like that. A red indicator lit up on the wall panel by the mudroom hallway. Pressure plate. Front landing occupied. He crossed the room, checked the camera feed, and saw them through ice-framed static. Elias Mercer, in a white-crusted parka. Nolan bent over someone smaller. Lena, with both arms around the children. 6 people, 1 hard minute from disaster. Rowan moved without panic, because panic ruins systems. If he threw both doors open, the wind would blast through the house, gut the warm core, and turn his refuge into another failing structure. The storm porch only worked if he used it correctly. Under pressure. In sequence. He opened the inner steel door and stepped into the unheated chamber. Bitter cold. no wind. He sealed the door behind him and threw the bolts on the outer door. The storm tried to rip it out of his hands. Elias and the others tumbled inward in a mess of frozen sleeves, boots, and gasping breath. Callum collapsed on the matting. Nolan shoved the outer door shut with Rowan's help. It took both men and all their weight to seal it. Then, silence. Not warmth, not safety, but silence. "Stay low," Rowan said. "Do not touch the inside handle." No one argued. Ice cracked off coats and hit the rubber floor. Wind pressure thudded against the outer door. The chamber smelled like wet wool, diesel, fear, and frozen salt. Rowan counted in his head, not because 10 seconds was magic, because systems needed a beat to settle. Exterior seal engaged. Airflow reduced. Storm contained to the first boundary. Then he opened the second door. Heat washed over them in one soft, impossible wave. Wood smoke, soup stock, dry air, light. Callum started crying before he even knew he was crying. Lena nearly fell again, this time because her legs stopped fighting for survival all at once. Tessa stood in the doorway, staring at the living room as if she had walked into a church. Boots off. Wet layers off. Slow, not fast, Rowan said. No one goes straight to the stove. If your hands are numb, keep them away from direct heat. He had blankets ready, broth warming, a medical kit open before Elias found enough breath to speak. "The boy first," Rowan said, kneeling by Callum. He checked fingers, earlobes, toes, then nodded once. "Cold injury, not full freeze. Good. We warm the core before the extremities." Nolan sat on the floor with steam rising off his jacket and stared at the entry hall in disbelief. "That porch," he said, voice shaking. "That damn porch held all of it." Rowan did not answer. Callum's hands in dry cloth and speaking to the boy in an even, unhurried tone that kept panic from taking root. Elias stood in the middle of the room, staring at the steel door, the weather stripping, the floor drain, the recessed hooks for iced-over coats, the exact details he had laughed at under gym lights with a microphone in his hand. "I was wrong," he said. Rowan kept working. Elias swallowed hard. "No, not wrong. Arrogant. I built a pretty house and called it safe. I made this town believe appearance was the same thing as resilience." Now Rowan looked up. Outside, the wind hit the bluff so hard the walls gave off a low, buried tremor. Inside, the stove cracked once and settled. "The coast doesn't care what we admire," Rowan said. "Not class, not status, not confidence. When systems fail, only the truth of the build remains." No one in the room could argue, because the evidence was all around them. The storm did not pass by dawn. It stayed. For 2 full days, the inlet remained locked inside a machine of ice, wind, and blackout. Rowan rationed food calmly, rotated people near and away from the stove, and used the storm porch again at first light to admit 2 more neighbors from lower on the road who had spent the night in a truck watching his chimney. The thermal lock worked every time.
Cold stopped at the first boundary. Life continued behind the second. By the end of the second night, Elias Mercer had stopped acting like a mayor and started acting like a man taking inventory of his own failures. Nolan Pike walked the house in open disbelief, running rough fingers over window recesses, backup latches, insulated utility chases, and the layers of thinking hidden behind every plane surface. "You built this for the exact night everybody swore would never come," Nolan said. Rowan poured more tea. "I built it because weather eventually collects on every debt we ignore." When the sky finally cleared on the third morning, helicopters came over the inlet and found Black Harbor half buried, glazed over, and broken open by burst pipes and wind damage. But high above the marina, one chimney was still breathing. One house still held its heat. One front entry still had a line of wet boots beneath it. The town rebuilt in the months that followed. Nolan stopped making jokes about overbuilding and started installing storm porches, manual latches, and secondary heat in every new plan he touched. Elias pushed through an emergency resilience ordinance requiring non-electric backup heat and protected entry chambers in new coastal construction. People who used to brag about window walls started asking about thermal breaks, wind pressure, and what Rowan had meant by first boundary and second. And Rowan? He finally got the one thing he had come to the bluff to find. Not admiration, not revenge. Respect quiet enough to leave him alone.
First snow, but before harbor ice formed, he found a cedar sign set in the gravel at the bottom of his drive. No note, no speech. Just two carved words burned dark into the wood. The second door. If this story got under your skin, leave a comment and tell me the worst weather you've ever underestimated. And if you know somebody who thinks comfort is the same thing as safety, send this to them before winter teaches the lesson for itself.